The blue folder was too thick for a brunch reservation, and my name was printed on a document inside it that I had never asked anyone to prepare. I heard the air conditioner click above me as I stood beside the small conference table. The folder's plastic cover felt cold under my fingertips. Somewhere beyond the closed door, silverware clattered against plates, and the room carried the sharp smell of coffee mixed with lemon furniture polish. My son reached across the table. "Dad, don't start." That was Jason's way of asking me not to read something. I kept my thumb on the page. At the top were the words, "Financial power of attorney." Under that sat another sheet with notes about cognitive concerns, financial supervision, and a consultation concerning guardianship. "What's this?" Natalie, my daughter-in-law, folded her hands over her purse. "It's planning, Andrew. That's all." Jason pulled the folder toward him. But I didn't let go immediately. I was 63 years old. I'd spent most of my adult life building an HVAC company in Charlotte, crawling through attics hot enough to bake your boots before I ever had employees to do it for me. I sold most of that company 6 years earlier. I still handled my investments, my house, my taxes, and my own decisions. Yet my 39-year-old son had brought paperwork about supervising me to brunch. "You told me we were looking at the wellness facilities," I said. "We are," Jason replied. "This is part of it." I released in the folder. The snap of the plastic cover closing sounded louder than he should have. Jason leaned back. Mom would have wanted us to have a plan. He knew better than to use Margaret that way. My wife had been gone 4 years, and there were still mornings when I reached for the second coffee mug before remembering there was no reason to take it down. Jason knew that too. "Your mother liked the volunteer program here," I said. "She never asked you to put me under supervision." Natalie touched Jason's sleeve. "Nobody said that." I looked at the folder. Somebody had typed it. The consultation ended without my signature on anything. Jason tucked the blue folder under his arm, and we walked into the dining room. He talked about the campus gym as if the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. I let him. During brunch, my phone buzzed with a payment reminder for a fishing trip I'd planned with 2 men who used to work for me. I paid the deposit. Then I approved a small donation I'd promised to an emergency fund for retired employees. Jason saw the confirmations. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "How much did you just spend?" "Enough." "On what?" "My money." Natalie stared down at her iced tea. Jason set his fork on the plate. "You're doing it again." A server passed behind me, carrying a tray of hot biscuits. Butter and fried bacon hung in the air. "Doing what?" "Throwing money around because somebody tells you a sad story." I wiped my fingers on the napkin. "You mean the men who helped build the company?" "Stop wasting my money." Jason's voice carried far enough that the staff member at the host stand looked over. "You've lived off me long enough." For a second, all I heard was the soft scrape of Natalie's NTA straw against the plastic lid of her glass. Then I asked, "Your money?" Jason's jaw shifted. "You know what I mean." "No, I don't." He lowered his voice. "I handle things for you. I pay bills. I keep you from missing things. You disappear for days. You spend whatever you feel like spending, and then I'm the one cleaning it up." Natalie finally looked at me. "Andrew, maybe today isn't the day. That folder says today was chosen in advance." Neither of them answered. I put cash beneath my coffee cup for the server and stood. Jason called after me, "Dad, don't make this into something it isn't." The folder was tucked against his ribs. I wondered how long it had existed before I'd seen it. At home, I didn't pour a drink or call anybody to complain. I opened my laptop. For years, Jason had helped with payment, logistics. After Margaret died, paperwork had piled up faster than I cared to admit. My son had offered to help, and I had let him become an authorized signer on one checking account. Later came limited transfer, authority on a reserve account, viewing and transfer access tied to an investment cash account and a supplemental credit card. Convenient, until it wasn't. The first thing I found was a pending transfer from my family reserve account. It wasn't $20 for groceries or a play, utility payment. The request was large enough that I sat forward and read it twice. The destination referenced one of Jason's business entities. I called the bank. The woman in security asked several identity questions, then confirmed what I already knew. But suddenly, I needed to hear from somebody else. I owned the account. Jason did not. His authority could be revoked. Next came the brokerage firm. Same answer. Limited authority wasn't ownership. Then the credit card. Company. 3 calls, 3 sets of notes, 3 confirmation numbers. I wrote each representative's name beside the time of the call on a yellow legal pad, the same habit I'd used when suppliers disputed invoices back in my contracting days. Paper first, arguments later. By late afternoon, I had moved my cash into accounts under my control alone, removed Jason's access where I legally could, and canceled his supplemental card. I left every account that belonged solely to him untouched. That distinction mattered to me. Apparently, it hadn't mattered to Jason. Before closing the laptop, I printed the statements showing the pending transfer. The amount was far beyond anything he'd mentioned needing from me. He hadn't asked. That was the part I kept coming back to. My phone rang while the printer was still humming. Jason. I let it ring. A minute. Later, Natalie called. I let that one ring too. Then a text appeared. From Jason. What did you do? I read it twice and placed the phone face down. Upstairs, I packed a small suitcase. Medication. 2 shirts. Jeans. Toiletries. My laptop. Identification. Margaret's old calendar. Notebook from the desk drawer. Before leaving the house, I opened the photo gallery on my phone. At the senior living campus. While Jason and Natalie had been talking to the consultant, I'd taken pictures of the pages visible inside that blue folder. Not every page. Enough. Financial power of attorney. Cognitive concerns. Guardianship consultation. Those photographs went into a maze. Encrypted folder on my laptop and a second secure copy. I booked a furnished cottage near Lake Norman for a week. The reservation was in my own name. I wasn't hiding from police, creditors, or the government. Before confirming it, I checked the drive from Charlotte and made sure I could get back to my doctor, bank, or house without depending on anybody for transportation. I also emailed the reservation receipt to myself. I was taking my address away from my son, not disappearing from the world. On the kitchen counter, I left a note. Use what is yours. Then I locked the door behind me. The drive north took less than an hour, but my phone kept vibrating in the cup holder. I didn't answer until I reached the Terror cottage and carried my suitcase inside. By then, there were 7 missed calls. 1 voicemail. Jason's voice came through the speaker lower than it had been at brunch. Dad, call me. Whatever you did to those accounts, fix it. My card was declined. The reserve account is empty, and I can't see the investment cash anymore. A pause. Then his tone changed. If you don't call me, I'm going to tell them you're vulnerable. I replayed the message. Not because I hadn't heard him, because of one word. Tem. Jason hadn't said he'd tell the family. He hadn't said Natalie. He'd said them. I looked across the little cottage at Margaret's notebook beside my laptop, then at the photographs of the blue folder glowing on the screen. That paperwork hadn't been prepared because I'd cut off Jason's access. The folder had been waiting for me before I'd touched a single account. And now I needed to know who them were. The knock came before I could decide whether them meant a lawyer, a doctor, or somebody with a badge. 3 firm taps hit the cottage door. My coffee sat untouched, beside Margaret's notebook, and Jason's voicemail was still open on my phone. When I looked through the narrow window, I saw a Mecklenburg County patrol car at the edge of the gravel drive. I opened the door. "Mr. Coleman?" the officer asked. "Yes." He introduced himself as Officer Ramirez and kept his hands loose near his belt. "Your son contacted us because he was concerned about your welfare. Before I drove out, I called the number he provided. You didn't answer. My phone was on silent." "That happens." Ramirez glanced past me. "Would you mind if we talked for a few minutes?" I stepped aside. The cottage smelled of the coffee I'd made and the cedar cleaner the owner used on the floors. Officer Ramirez didn't search anything. He asked whether I knew where I was, whether I had my medication, whether I had driven myself, and whether anyone had forced me to leave home. "No." "Are you planning to hurt yourself or anybody else?" "No." "Do you feel safe here?" "Yes." He nodded and wrote something on a small pad. Then came the part Jason had prepared. "Your son mentioned some recent concerns about memory and judgment." "Recent?" Ramirez looked at his notes. He gave me a few examples. I waited. There was an incident involving a stove. I almost laughed, but the sound never came out. In December of 2024, I'd left a pot of soup on low heat while I went into the garage to answer a call from an old employee. The call ran longer than expected. The smoke alarm complained before anything burned. I came back inside, shut off the burner, opened 2 windows, and ate a sandwich instead. One mistake. Officer Ramirez continued. "A missed medical appointment." "Dental appointment," I said. "March of last year. I entered the wrong date after changing phones." He looked up. "And a possible scam call in January." That one irritated me more. A man had called pretending to be from my bank. I answered 2 questions. Didn't like the third, hung up, and called the number printed on the back of my card. No money moved. No account was compromised. Ramirez didn't argue with me. "I'm not here to make a medical determination, Mr. Coleman. I know. My job today is to make sure you're safe." "And am I?" His pen stopped. "From what I can see right now, you're an adult who knows where he is and doesn't appear to be in to immediate danger. That's all I can tell you." "Fair enough." Before leaving, Officer Ramirez gave me a card and suggested I answer if the department called again. The patrol car crunched down the gravel road, and I stood at the doorway until the sound faded. Jason had taken 3 ordinary mistakes, spread across more than a year, and arranged them side by side. On paper, they looked different. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." "No." Shouting this time. "Did you send the police?" "I asked someone to check on you." "You told them I'm confused." "I told them what happened." "You told them pieces." Jason exhaled slowly. "You vanished after emptying accounts and cutting off cards." What was I supposed to think? My accounts. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're stuck on ownership while everyone else is trying to make sure you're okay. Everyone else. There it was. Again. Who is everyone? A pause followed. Family. Which family? Dad, listen to yourself. His voice had become calm enough to sound practiced. That bothered me more than the yelling at brunch. "You just proved why we need a plan," Jason said. "If you'd stayed home and talked to us, none of this would have happened." The blue folder was printed. Before I left home. Silence. Then Jason said, "Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." The line went dead. A text arrived from Natalie, less than a minute later. "The kids are asking why Grandpa left. Please, don't make them carry this." I stared at the message, then set the phone down. My grandchildren were 12 and 9. Whatever Jason had told them, I wasn't going to fight through their screens. Instead, I called Dr. Reed's office. The receptionist recognized my name and asked whether I needed an appointment. I need copies of my records, I said, especially anything about memory, confusion, cognitive problems, or concerns about my ability to manage my affairs. There was a short pause at the other end. Mr. Coleman, we can prepare your records for you. You'll need to complete the release. Has anyone else requested them? I can't discuss another person's communications without checking what I'm allowed to disclose. That answer told me enough about how careful the Cleese office was being. I arranged to pick up my own records after completing the paperwork. I still had no idea how many details Jason had already collected. Back at the table, I opened the bank statements I'd downloaded the night before. The family household account showed mortgage payments, utilities, property tax installments, insurance, repairs, and plenty of expenses Jason liked to describe as things he handled. He had handled the buttons. My money had handled the bills. Then, I opened the reserve account history. A transfer from the previous spring caught my eye. Temporary bridge, Jason had called it. Another appeared several months earlier. Then, another. I printed the pages and spread them beside Margaret's notebook. Some were modest enough that I remembered approving them without much, I thought. Others were larger. One had gone to an entity with Coleman in the name. Another to an account I recognized from one of Jason's real estate projects. I added them on a legal pad. The total was not a number. I remembered agreeing to as a single amount. I went back through my emails and found the conversations I could match. Jason rarely asked for money in one clean request. One week it was a contractor who had to be paid before a draw came through. Another time it was earnest money that would supposedly return after a closing. Once, he called while I was standing in the hardware aisle at Lowe's and talked until I approved a transfer simply to get off the phone. Each request had sounded temporary because I had heard it alone. The statements put them in a row. That didn't mean the transfers were unauthorized. Most had been discussed. The problem was how often the same phrase appeared in my memory. Just temporary, Dad. I'll put it back. Closing is next month. The bank confirmed that morning that Jason's authority was fully revoked. The brokerage firm sent written confirmation too. His access was gone. Mine, it wasn't. I called the card company one more time because I wanted the distinction in writing. The representative confirmed Jason's supplemental card had been canceled, while his own personal accounts and cards remained untouched. I asked for an email confirmation and saved it, beside the bank notices. If Jason wanted to tell people I'd emptied his accounts, he could say it. The records would say something else. For the first time since brunch, I had something close to quiet. It lasted 11 minutes. An email appeared with the subject line, Coleman Family, Protective Planning. The sender was a Charlotte attorney named Martin Keller. Mr. Coleman, the message began, I have been consulted regarding concerns about your recent financial decisions and personal safety. Your family would prefer to resolve these concerns voluntarily. We would welcome a discussion concerning protective planning before any formal petition is considered. I read that sentence again. Before any formal petition is considered. The email wasn't dated that morning because Jason had suddenly panicked after losing access. Keller referred to an earlier consultation and materials already prepared for review. The blue folder. That mattered. If Keller had been consulted before brunch, then the paperwork wasn't a response to what I'd done afterward. Somebody had already decided I needed protective planning, while Jason still had access to my reserve money. I scrolled farther. The attorney listed several concerns without making any medical claim. Leaving home, unexpectedly. Cutting off established financial assistance. A substantial transfer to someone outside the family. Reports of forgetfulness, possible financial exploitation. My eyes stopped on one phrase. A substantial transfer to an unrelated woman. No name, no date, just enough to make it sound dirty. I leaned back and looked at Margaret's notebook across the table. Jason wasn't merely collecting mistakes anymore. He had found a woman. Her name was Diane Foster, and Jason had circled the transfer on a screenshot before Natalie sent it to me. The message arrived while I was still staring at Martin Keller's email. Andrew, please look at this and tell us you honestly think this is normal. Below that sat a cropped bank statement showing $75,000 leaving one of my accounts and going to Diane. Natalie had added another line. We are trying to protect you, not embarrass you. I called Diane. She answered with a drill whining somewhere behind her. Andrew, give me a second. The noise stopped. What's wrong? She asked. My family found the transfer. Silence. Then Diane said, Do you want me to come to you? No. I want to see exactly what the money paid. For, you already have the invoices. I want to see it. Diane gave me the address. Her house sat west of Charlotte on a street of brick ranch. Homes with old maples pushing roots through the sidewalks. The contractor's van blocked half the driveway. Sheets of plywood leaned against the garage, and a temporary aluminum ramp ran from the front, walked to the porch. Diane met me at the door wearing work gloves. You look like somebody subpoenaed your breakfast, she said. Close. That was Diane. No soft voice. No careful circling. Inside, a carpenter was widening a doorway. Beyond him, Diane's older brother, Raymond, sat in a wheelchair beside a window. Raymond had worked for me for almost 18 years. A workplace accident after he'd left my company had damaged his spine. Insurance covered plenty, but plenty wasn't the same as everything. Diane spread a stack of papers across her kitchen. Counter, contractor estimates, accessibility plans, receipts, a written agreement showing exactly what my $75,000 was intended to cover: a roll-in shower, wider doors, a permanent ramp, changes to the kitchen. Nothing romantic, nothing secret. I photographed every invoice and asked Diane to email copies directly to me. One estimate carried the contractor's license information. Another showed the deposit date, matching my bank transfer. Raymond rolled closer and tapped the top sheet. You didn't hand us a bag of cash, he said. Every dollar is tied to this house. I know. Then why are we proving it? My son is telling people I may not know what I'm doing. Raymond's fingers stopped on the paper. Diane's face changed first. Jason? Yes. Raymond gave a grating, dry laugh. The same Jason who used to come into your shop in loafers and ask why the service trucks were dirty. The same one. Then keep the receipts. I did. Diane pulled off one glove finger by finger. Margaret knew. I looked up. She knew you were helping Raymond? She knew before you did. That made me stop. Diane explained that a few months before Margaret died, my wife had called her. She knew Raymond's insurance fight was getting ugly. She said, if I ever offered to help, Diane was supposed to let me. Margaret had always understood one thing about me. If someone asked directly, I sometimes said no because I hated being cornered. If I discovered a problem myself, I would tear apart a wall to fix it. Diane gave a small shrug. She knew you. What else did she say? The carpenter's saw started in the next room, then stopped. Diane looked toward the doorway before answering. She said something strange. How? Strange? She said, if Jason ever started talking like everything belonged to him, I should tell you to open the cedar box. I didn't. Speak. What cedar box? I assumed you'd know. I didn't. Diane's mouth tightened. Andrew. Margaret said it exactly once. I asked what he meant. She told me you'd understand when you needed to. I looked down at the invoices. My wife had been dead 4 years, and somehow she had just entered the argument. Back in Charlotte, Dr. Reed's office had my records ready. The receptionist slid the packet across the counter. After checking my identification, I sat in my truck and read through pages of blood work, blood pressure notes, medication changes, annual, physicals, and the ordinary complaints of a man moving through his early 60s. Then I found the sentence Jason had probably built around. Patient reports occasional forgetfulness since spouse's death. That was it. No dementia diagnosis. No finding that I couldn't manage money. No, a recommendation that Jason control my affairs. At my next appointment, Dr. Reed agreed to speak with me directly. Did you ever tell Jason I was incompetent? I asked. Reed removed his glasses. No. Did you tell him I needed a financial guardian? No. Did you recommend a power of scribe, attorney naming him? No. He tapped the record with one finger. Andrew. Forgetting an appointment or walking into a room and forgetting why you're there is not the same thing as a diagnosis. If I had concerns requiring further evaluation, I would document them and discuss them with you. Could someone still ask for an evaluation? Anyone can. Raise a concern. That doesn't make the concern medically established. I asked whether he would put that clarification in my chart. I'll document what we discussed, Reed said, but don't ask me to write a legal conclusion. That's not what this record is. I don't need a favor. Good. I need the truth to stay the truth. That earned a brief nod. At that point, I had cleared Diane's name and learned that my doctor's note said far less than Jason wanted people to believe. I should have felt safer. Instead, Margaret's cedar box was all I could think about. From the parking lot, I sent Jason a short email. I attached only the relevant page from Dr. Reed's record and told him Diane's transfer was documented. Stop telling people I have been diagnosed with cognitive impairment. I have not. His reply came before I reached the next traffic light. A primary care note isn't the final word, Dad. No apology. No question about Diane. Just that. I pulled into a shopping center and read it again. The final word. Jason wasn't trying to understand whether I was capable. He was already thinking about who else might be asked to decide. I drove to the storage facility that afternoon. Margaret and I had rented the unit years earlier when we downsized from the house where Jason grew up. Christmas decorations, old company plaques, boxes of photographs, Margaret's sewing machine, and several pieces of furniture we kept promising to sort through had ended up there. The manager, a woman named Denise, checked my identification and account access. I'm looking for something that may have been removed recently, I said. Do you know when? No. Inside the unit, heat pressed through the metal walls. Dust coated the plastic bins. I moved 2 boxes, marked Christmas, and found the shelf where Margaret had kept smaller household papers. A clean rectangle showed through the dust. I knew the cedar box as soon as I saw the space it had occupied. About 2 feet long. Brass latch. Margaret used to keep letters and household papers in it. Gone. I checked the floor, then the bins beneath the shelf. An old envelope of family photographs had slipped behind a fogged plastic tote. I pulled it free, hoping for no sensible reason that the box might somehow be underneath. Nothing. Back in the office, Denise pulled up the gate log. We keep access records for a year, she said. Anyone using an authorized credential leaves a timestamp. Jason, still, had a family access credential from when he'd helped move some furniture. Denise printed the entries connected to it. There weren't many. One date made my fingers tighten on the page. Late July, 2 weeks, before the brunch. Can you tell which vehicle came in? The credential is registered to the vehicle information we had when it was issued. She turned the screen slightly. Jason's SUV. I asked Denise to print the credential assignment and access entry. Both pages went flat into the document sleeve I'd brought from the cottage. I called Jason from the parking lot. He didn't answer. So I sent one sentence. I know you went into the storage unit. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared. A minute passed. Nothing. I looked at the Kraus date again. Jason hadn't taken Margaret's box after I cut off his accounts. He hadn't taken it after I left Charlotte. He hadn't taken it after the welfare check. He had gone looking through his mother's things before he ever put that blue folder in front of me. Whatever he was, afraid I might find, he'd started hiding it first. Jason answered my message 20 minutes later. I didn't steal anything, Dad. I moved. Mom's private things somewhere safe. I read it twice. The word safe bothered me. Safe from whom? I called him. What did you take out of the storage unit? Jason didn't bother pretending he hadn't been there. The cedar box. Bring it back. No. His answer came so quickly that I stopped walking. I was outside the cottage, phone against my ear, staring at the lake through a row of pines. Why not? Because some of Mom's things are private. She was my wife, and she was my mother. Jason, you went into my storage unit 2 weeks before you put preferred guardianship papers in front of me. They weren't guardianship papers. I photographed them. A pause. Then Jason said, You keep turning everything into a threat. Bring back the box. I'll talk to you when you're calmer. He hung up. I stood there listening to nothing. For 4 years, Margaret's calendar notebook had sat in a desk drawer because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I had carried it to Lake Norman, almost by accident. One more piece of her handwriting I didn't want. Jason touching. Now I opened it properly. Margaret never kept a diary. She recorded appointments, birthdays, repair estimates, tax reminders, church dinners, and notes that made sense only to her. Some pages held grocery lists beside investment calls. Others had names with arrows and question marks. I started with the final year and worked backward. 2021, 2020, then 2018. Jason's name appeared beside a date in May. Next to it was an amount, written in Margaret's narrow blue script. 600,000. He checked the page again. Underneath, she had written 4 words. Jason, promised Andrew doesn't know. My thumb stayed on the paper. Margaret and I had been married more than 3 decades by then. We'd argued about employees, vacations, furniture, Jason, and whether a man really needed 4 extension ladders after selling most of his company. $600,000 wasn't a forgotten grocery bill. I remembered that spring differently. Jason had been talking constantly about commercial property and how banks only respected people who moved quickly. Margaret had asked me twice whether I thought he was stretching to himself. I'd told her our son was nearly 31 and old enough to learn what leverage cost. Apparently, that conversation hadn't ended. When I left the room, I opened my laptop. Our old tax files had been digitized years earlier. Margaret had organized them by year, with a precision I used to tease her about. I searched the investment statements from 2018. The first file showed nothing. The second was quarterly. There it was. $600,000 had left our joint investment cash account and gone to Coleman Ridge LLC. I knew the name. Jason had used Coleman Ridge for one of his real estate projects. I leaned closer to the screen. The transfer date matched. Margaret's notebook. No memo said gift. No memo said loan. Only money. Leaving an account Margaret and I owned together and entering an entity tied to our son. I opened the surrounding monthly statements to make sure I wasn't looking at a transfer that had returned days later. It hadn't. The next statement showed the balance still lower. The quarter after that showed no matching deposit back. I checked our email archive. Nothing obvious appeared under the company and name. That didn't prove Margaret had deleted anything. She might have handled the paperwork elsewhere. She had always managed the household files while I handled the company, major contracts, and investment decisions. Division of labor. I had once thought that meant trust. My phone rang. My older cousin Robert was calling. "Andrew," he said. "What the hell is going on? Which version did you hear?" That answer isn't helping. Then tell me what Jason said. Robert hesitated. He said you disappeared. Said you cut off accounts he uses to take care of your expenses. Said there's some woman getting money. Diane Foster. So, there is a woman? I closed my eyes. She's Raymond Foster's sister. The money is paying for wheelchair modifications to his house. I have invoices. Robert went quiet. Then he said, "Jason also said you sent him some medical record because you're angry he raised concerns. He raised 3 mistakes from 3 different years and turned them into a diagnosis I don't have. Look, I'm not taking sides. People usually said that after someone had already handed them aside. What does Jason want?" "A family meeting." I looked down at Margaret's notebook. "When?" "Sunday." "Who'll be there?" "He mentioned me, your sister, Natalie, maybe a couple other people." He said no lawyers. Just family. That phrase sounded less comforting than Jason probably intended. Robert cleared his throat. "Andrew, for what it's worth, Jason sounds convinced. He's helping. Did he tell you about the blue folder?" "What blue folder?" "There it was. No matter. I'll see you Sunday." After the call, I searched for the number of Laura Bennett, the CPA Margaret and I had used for years. Laura answered from her office. "Andrew Coleman. I haven't heard your voice in months. I need to ask about a transfer from 2018. The friendliness left her tone. "How large?" 600,000. From our joint investment cash account to Coleman Ridge LLC. A few seconds passed. I remember the entity name. Was it a gift? I don't want to answer that from memory. Was it a loan? Same answer. I pressed my fingers against the notebook. Laura, Margaret wrote that Jason promised I didn't know. Another pause. When Laura spoke again, each word came slower. I remember paperwork associated with money going to Jason. I believe there may have been a promissory document, but I will not tell you there was until I see it. Where is it? Older files were moved off-site when we changed document systems. Some estate records were archived with the tax support. How long? About a week if the box is where the index says it is. 2 week. Andrew, if you're asking me whether I remember enough to accuse your son of lying, I don't. I didn't ask you to. Good. Because records first. Margaret would have liked that answer. Laura, one more thing. If you find anything, don't send it to Jason. Don't discuss it with Natalie. I wouldn't discuss your records with either of them, without authority. Thank you. Andrew? Yes? Keep whatever you know. Looking at now. Don't write on originals. Don't throw anything away, because it hurts to read. I looked at Margaret's notebook. I won't. The cottage had grown warm. I opened a window, and the smell of lake, water and cut grass came through the screen. $600,000. A possible promissory document. A cedar box Jason had removed before our confrontation. None of it told me yet whether Margaret had lent him money, given it to him, or rescued him from something neither. All of them wanted me to see. But it changed one thing. Jason's claim that he had spent years carrying me, no longer sounded merely insulting. It sounded upside down. The next thing I received made it clear Jason. He wasn't waiting for me to finish asking questions. My phone chimed with a group message. Jason had sent it to several relatives. Sunday, 3:00. My house. No lawyers, just family. We need to discuss Dad's safety and finances before this gets worse. Natalie added a heart beneath it. Then Jason sent another message directly to me. Please come, voluntarily. Don't make everyone chase you. I looked at the wording. Not, come if you want. Not, let's talk, voluntarily. I typed a reply, erased. It then typed another. I'll be there. Before sending it, I photographed the page from Margaret's notebook and saved the old bank statement in the same secure folder as the blue folder pictures and Jason's voicemail. I printed a second copy of the transfer statement and placed it with Diane's invoices and Dr. Reed's record, not because I expected a courtroom on Sunday, because Jason had already taught me what happened when one person arrived with a folder and everyone else arrived with memories. I still didn't know what Laura would find. At Sunday's table, Jason could call the $600,000 a gift. He could call Margaret's note meaningless. He could tell everyone I was confused, angry, or rewriting history, and until Laura opened that archive, I couldn't prove otherwise. I pressed send. I'll be there. Jason responded almost immediately. Good. No surprises. I looked at Margaret's handwriting again. He had no idea how badly I wanted the same thing. Jason had arranged the chairs before I arrived. That was the first thing I noticed. His dining table had been pushed against the wall, and 8 chairs formed a loose half-circle in the living room. A stack of papers sat on the coffee table beside a pitcher of water and untouched glasses. No one had come for coffee. No, one had come to visit. Robert stood near the fireplace with my sister, Ellen. Natalie was on the sofa, one ankle tucked beneath her. Jason remained by the coffee table, sleeves rolled to his forearms as if we were about to discuss quarterly numbers. My grandchildren ran in from the hallway before anyone could speak. Grandpa, my 9-year-old grandson said. I hugged him, then his older sister. Jason watched from across the room. Natalie touched her daughter's shoulder. Why don't you two go upstairs for a while? We'll call you when we're done. Good. At least he hadn't put children in the audience for what came next. When they disappeared upstairs, Jason pointed toward the only empty chair in the center of the half-circle. Sit down, Dad. I looked at the Bellady chair, then at him. No. Robert shifted his weight. Ellen pressed her lips together. Jason gave a short nod. Fine, stand. He picked up a folder. Not blue this time. We're here because this has gone too far, my son said. Nobody wants to take anything from you. We want to make sure you're safe. I didn't answer. Jason began with the stove. December, 2 years earlier. Soup left on low heat while I took a phone. Call in the garage. He left out the part where the smoke alarm worked, and nothing caught fire. Then came the dental appointment I'd missed, after putting the wrong date into a new phone. Next, the scam call. You started giving information to somebody pretending to be your bank, Jason said. I stopped the call myself. You started it. And lost. Nothing. That isn't the point. Natalie leaned forward. Andrew, nobody is saying you're helpless. Then why did I see paperwork about guardianship? Her eyes moved to Jason. My son answered, because the responsible families ask what options exist before there's an emergency. Robert rubbed his chin. Jason, did a doctor tell you Andrew can't handle his affairs? No, Jason said. Not yet. That last word landed harder than the rest. He moved on to Diane. A $75,000 transfer to a lighter woman outside the family, Jason said. A woman nobody knew about. I opened the document envelope I'd brought. Her name is Diane Foster. Her Brother worked for me for almost 18 years. Contractor invoices went onto the coffee table. Accessibility plans followed. The written agreement. The transfer confirmation. Ellen picked up the first. Estimate. This is for wheelchair work? Yes. Jason crossed his arms. That doesn't change the amount. No. It changes your story about the dough. Amount. Natalie looked at one of the invoices. Her thumb stayed against the edge of the page for a moment before she put it down. I added, Doctor. Reed's record. Read the sentence you keep repeating. I told Jason. He didn't touch it. Robert did. Patient reports occasional forgetfulness. Since spouse's death, he read aloud. I waited. Robert turned the page, over as if there might be more. That's it? That's the medical record. Jason has been stretching into a diagnosis. Jason's voice sharpened. A primary care note doesn't prove you're fine. No, but it proves you. Don't get to say a doctor diagnosed me when he didn't. Ellen looked at Jason. Did you tell me the doctor was concerned? I said there were medical concerns. That's not what I asked. For the first time that afternoon, my son's prepared rhythm slipped. Only for a second. Then Jason reached for another paper. Let's talk about the MAR accounts. I put the ownership confirmations beside the medical record. Family household checking. My name as owner. Family reserve account. Mine. Investment cash relationship. Mine. Supplemental card. Mine. I revoked authority I had granted, I said. His personal accounts weren't touched. Robert read the bank confirmation, then passed it to Ellen. The room changed a little. Not enough. Jason had saved his best document. He held up a printed email. This is from Dad. A few months after Mom died. I knew the words before he read them. I don't know how to keep track of any of this without her. The email had been written after I spent half a day searching for an insurance renewal. Margaret, normally handled in 20 minutes. I'd sent it to Jason at 2 in the morning. He read another line. I keep finding bills I didn't know existed and papers I don't understand. Ellen lowered her eyes. That email did what the stove story hadn't. It put Margaret in the room. Jason's voice softened. This is why I stepped in. Dad asked for help. I did. Everyone looked at me. I kept Ader. Your mother handled household paperwork. I handled the company, contracts, investments, payroll, equipment, insurance for employees, and every major business decision we made for decades. When she died, I didn't know where she kept half the household files, Natalie said. And Jason helped you. Yes, she spread her hands. Then why are we pretending his concern came from nowhere? Because that was the difficult part. It hadn't come from nowhere. It had grown from a door I'd opened myself. Jason had helped, then helped more. Somewhere along the way, assistance had become permission in his mind. I pulled out the foes, old bank statement. Since we're discussing who has been supporting whom, let's discuss this. Jason saw the amount before anyone else did. His shoulders went still. $600,000, I said, transferred from the joint account your mother and I owned to Coleman, Ridge in 2018. Natalie's gaze moved to the statement. Robert whistled under his breath. Jason recovered quickly. Mom gave me that money. A gift? Yes. Why didn't I know? She knew how you'd react. That answer hurt because it was possible. Margaret had protected Jason before. Small things. Credit card trouble in college. A business mistake in his 20s. She had believed mercy could teach what consequences sometimes couldn't. I placed a photograph of her notebook entry beside the statement. Jason promised Andrew doesn't know. Ellen read it, silently. Natalie spoke before anyone else could. Margaret wanted Jason to have it. You know that? I asked. Yes. How? Because she told both of you? Natalie nodded. Yes. I had no promissory note. No repayment schedule. No document that could prove they were lying. Not yet. Jason knew it. He sat down for the first time all afternoon. Dad, none of us wants a fight over old money. Get evaluated by someone. Independent. If they say you're fine, then we deal with everything else. I almost refused simply because the request came from him. Robert spoke first. Andrew, do it. I turned toward him. My cousin held up both hands. Not for Jason, for yourself. You've got records that answer some of this. Let a qualified person answer the rest. Otherwise, every time you say no, he'll call the no itself proof. Ellen nodded slowly. That was the trap. Refuse. And Jason would say I feared the result. Agree. And he could. Tell everyone his concern had been serious enough to force an evaluation. I looked at my son. Independent, I said. Not your doctor. Not your lawyer's choice without my agreement. Jason's mouth relaxed. Fine. And you get no control over the report. We'll work out the details. No. That's one of the details. Robert stepped between us before the argument could start again. Then that's progress. It didn't. I feel like progress. When I left, my granddaughter came downstairs and hugged me near the front door. She asked when I was coming home. I told, with her soon. I didn't tell her I no longer knew what home meant in that house. My phone rang before I reached the end of Jason Street. Laura, Bennett. I pulled into an empty church parking lot and answered. Laura, I have the archive. The paper bag holding my copies crackled. Against the passenger seat, she continued. Careful as always. There is a signed promissory note. There is also supporting email, correspondence. I gripped the steering wheel. So, it wasn't a gift. No, Andrew, Laura said. It wasn't a gift. Laura's office smelled, faintly of toner and burnt coffee, the way accounting offices always seemed to after lunch. She placed the promissory note between us, without sliding it all the way, across the desk. Read the date first, she said. May of 2018. Then the amount. $600,000. Jason Coleman, borrower. Margaret Coleman, lender. The note ran several pages. Annual. Interest. A 10-year term. Principal due at maturity in 2028. Jason's signature sat at the bottom beside a notary. Acknowledgement. I read his name twice. Laura watched me without speaking. He told everyone it was a gift. I heard you, he said. Margaret wanted him to have it. Laura tapped the repayment section. This says otherwise. I turned the page. A schedule showed interest. Payments for several years. Some had arrived on time. Others came late. The payments stopped after 2023. Why didn't I see this? Margaret handled the file originally. After she died, the note appeared in the estate accounting. I handled her estate. You signed the distribution documents. That stopped me. Laura reached into another folder and pulled out the old estate summary. The note was listed among Margaret's assets, not in large print, not highlighted. One line among brokerage holdings, personal property, and other receivables. I recognized my signature at the bottom. You were grieving, Laura said, and your estate attorney summarized the categories. The note passed to you under the distribution. So I own it now. You hold the creditor's rights now, yes. That doesn't mean you can ignore the contract terms because you're angry. I wasn't planning to. Good. Her voice had the same flat edge she used when telling clients that wanting something didn't change tax law. I looked back at the note. Margaret hadn't given Jason $600,000. She had lent it to him, and Jason had stood in his living room 2 days earlier and called it a gift. Laura opened another document. This email was stored with the note. The sender was Jason. The recipient was Margaret. The subject line meant nothing. Just a project. Name. Then I saw the sentence. Dad can never know. He'd cut me off. My throat went dry enough that I reached for the glass of water on Laura's desk. The rest of the email was worse in a quieter way. Jason thanked his mother for giving him time to prove the deal works. He promised to keep up with the interest. He said the project would stabilize once the property refinanced. No apology for hiding it from me. No suggestion he misunderstood the money. He knew. How much of this did Natalie know? I asked. Laura pulled up another archived thread. By 2021, she was copied on a repayment schedule. Natalie's email sat below it. We have the dates. Jason will make sure it is handled. That was all. Enough. At the intervention, Natalie had looked to me in the face and said Margaret wanted Jason to have the money. I folded my hands in my lap. Laura noticed. Don't call them from this office. I wasn't going to. You're thinking loudly. That almost made me smile. Almost. Instead, I asked the question that mattered more. What did Jason do with the money? Laura turned her monitor toward me. Coleman Ridge bought an equity position in a commercial property. Your $600,000 appears to have been used as part of the down payment and initial capital. So the money is still in that property? Not exactly. Of course not. The property had later been refinanced. Jason pulled equity from it, and part of his interest was then pledged into another commercial deal. Laura drew 2 boxes on a legal pad and connected them with an arrow. This is the simple version, she said. First deal supported the second. The second has its own debt, and wonders, partner obligations. How bad? That depends on whether Jason meets the upcoming capital call. She wrote the amount. $320,000. I sat back. When? Roughly 3 weeks. That number explained the when. Pending transfer I'd found in my family reserve account. Not all of it, but enough. The temporary bridges from the last couple of years stopped, looking temporary when Laura lined them up against Jason's projects. Money out, promise of repayment, another request months later, then another. I had been filling holes without seeing the shape of the bucket. Laura showed me the dates beside those advances. None of them, by itself, looked like a rescue. Put together, they formed a rhythm. Jason had learned how much to ask for before the request sounded dangerous. What happens if he doesn't make the call? His partners can exercise remedies under the agreement. Depending on what happens next, there may be pressure on the pledged interest and a risk of default. Elsewhere. Cross default? Potentially. I need the complete loan documents before I say more. Laura drew a line under the 300-point, 20,000. This is why I told you not to make a move based on anger. If you demand things, the note doesn't let you demand, you create a new problem. If you give him money without understanding this structure, you may only delay the old one. I looked at the number. Jason hadn't needed me because I was confused. He needed me liquid. My phone vibrated. For 1 second, I expected his name. Instead, it was the office conducting the independent cognitive evaluation. My appointment was that afternoon. The testing room was quiet enough that I could hear the second hand on the wall clock. The evaluator, Dr. Elaine Morris, explained what she was doing before she began. Memory questions, attention, judgment, problem solving, daily functioning. Nothing theatrical. Some tasks were easy. A few irritated me. One involved repeating words after a delay while my brain insisted on thinking about $600,000 in Jason's email. Dr. Morris noticed me pause. Take your time. I'd rather not. That isn't part of the score. Her voice was dry enough to remind me of Laura. By the end, my neck ached from sitting still. Morris did not hand me a certificate declaring me competent. She explained that a full written, the report would take time. But I can tell you this, she said. I am not seeing evidence today that would, by itself, suggest you cannot understand or manage ordinary personal and financial decisions. I let out a breath through my nose. That's careful. It should be. Can Jason get this report? Not from me without proper authorization or legal process. Good. I left with no celebration, just a follow-up date and one less open question. The bigger question was waiting in Laura's documents. Back at the cottage that evening, I laid 3 things on the table: Margaret's notebook, Jason's promissory note, the printout of his email saying I could never know. For years I had believed my son was helping me manage life after Margaret died. Now he could see another pattern beneath it. His mother had lent him money in secret. I had given him bridge money openly. He had access to family reserves. And when I finally removed that access, the first thing he did was start building a case that I shouldn't control my own finances. I called Laura. I won't fund another bridge. That's your decision, and I won't demand $600,000 tomorrow just because the note is mine. Good. I want the complete repayment history, the current default status, and whatever commercial documents we can properly obtain. I'll work with what we have and tell you what requires counsel. There was a pause. Andrew, are you prepared for the 22 possibility that letting him face this deadline hurts him badly? I looked at Margaret's handwriting. She protected him from consequences. So did I. Laura didn't answer. I need to know what happens when we stop. The next morning she sent me a 1-page schedule. At the bottom, the capital call deadline sat in black type. $320,000. Less than 3 weeks. Under it was a note about remedies available to the lender and partners if Jason failed to perform, including risks tied to the interest he'd pledged in the second deal. I read the page once, then again. Jason had spent weeks telling people I could no longer manage money. But the deadline on Laura's page belonged to him. And this time, I wasn't paying it. The envelope arrived by certified mail 4 days after Laura showed me the capital call. My name was centered on the front in black type. Andrew Coleman. No handwritten note. No family language. No dad. Inside was a petition filed in Mecklenburg County asking the court to adjudicate me incompetent and appoint a guardian. I read the first page standing at the cottage kitchen counter. Then the second. Jason had taken everything he'd been saying privately and put it into a formal document. The stove incident, the missed dental appointment, the scam call, the transfer to Diane, my decision to leave home, the accounts I'd closed to his access, the email I'd written after Margaret died saying I didn't know how to keep track of things without her. Each event looked heavier in legal formatting. I sat down before reaching the signature page. Jason's name was there. So was the date. He had filed after I refused another bridge, but the draft language reached back through years of small mistakes, as if someone had been collecting them in a drawer. I called an attorney that afternoon. Her name was Rebecca Sloan. Laura had given me 2 names, and Rebecca, he was the first who could meet quickly. Her office sat in a brick building near uptown Charlotte, not far from the courthouse. The filing also meant a guardian ad litem would be appointed to represent my interests. In the incompetency proceeding, Rebecca made it clear that her role as my retained counsel was separate, and that the case would still move through the clerk's hearing process rather than disappear because I had hired her. She read the petition without interrupting me. When she'd finished, she closed the packet. Your son's motive may matter, Rebecca said. But motive alone won't decide whether you're competent. I have Dr. Morris's evaluation underway. Good. Dr. Reed's records too. Good. And bank records showing the accounts were mine. Rebecca nodded once. All useful. But don't make the mistake of treating This like a family argument, where proving Jason wrong automatically proves you right. Her voice was precise, almost dry. What do I need to prove? That you understand your circumstances, can make and communicate decisions, and can manage your affairs well enough that the relief he's asking for isn't justified. I looked at the petition. So, my whole life becomes evidence. Parts of it. That was not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Rebecca slid a legal pad toward me. We'll need a timeline. Medical records you authorize us to obtain. Financial statements. Documentation for the Diane transfer. Anything showing your daily functioning. And every communication from Jason that relates to money, access, guardianship, or this petition. I thought of the voicemail. If you don't call me, I'm going to tell them you're vulnerable. Then the attorney email. Then Jason's reply about the final word. Rebecca tapped the petition. Preserve everything. Don't delete messages because they're upsetting. Don't answer emotional bait. And don't secretly record calls unless we know exactly what we're doing. Under state law, I don't need to record him. Good. I need him to keep writing. That earned the first expression close to approval I'd seen from her. Over. The next several days, privacy became paperwork. Rebecca's office copied. Bank statements showing ownership and access authority. I signed. Releases for Dr. Reed's records and for Dr. Morris's completed. Evaluation when it was ready. Diane's contractor invoices went into another folder. The statement, proving I had transferred my own money, not Jason's, went beside the account confirmations. Then came the parts I hated. My medication list. Margaret's death certificate. The grief. Email. Household payment records. Questions about whether I cooked, drove, paid property taxes, renewed insurance, scheduled appointments, and handled investment decisions. Normal life, itemized. One afternoon, I sat in Rebecca's conference room while her paralegal asked me how often I saw my grandchildren. I answered. Then I looked down at the form. This has nothing to do with whether I know what I'm doing. Rebecca, seated across from me, said, maybe not directly, but Jason may. Use family contact to suggest isolation or instability. We answer what matters and object where appropriate. I rubbed my thumb against the tan edge of the paper. Jason had turned my grief into a paragraph. Now the court would turn my routines into exhibits. That was the cost of refusing to let him define me without challenge. Dr. Morris's preliminary note arrived later that week. Her full report was still pending. But nothing in the evaluation suggested I was unable to understand ordinary personal or financial decisions. Rebecca read it twice. This helps. Enough? Don't ask me for guarantees. Laura, we would have liked her. I spent that evening organizing the messages Rebecca wanted. The dates lined up in a way I hadn't noticed when they arrived one by one. Jason's concern about my safety intensified each time I resisted giving him access. The language changed too. At first, he said family, then protection, then planning, now a court filing. It wasn't proof by itself, but it had a direction. The next afternoon, while I was driving back toward Lake Norman, Jason called. I let it go. To voicemail. His message lasted less than a minute. Dad, this can still stop. Sign a limited financial power of attorney. Restore access to the family reserve. And I will talk to counsel about withdrawing the petition. Nobody wants to drag this through court. I pulled into a gas station and replayed it. Then I forwarded the audio file to Rebecca. 10 minutes later, Jason sent an email. The language was cleaner. He proposed temporary protective authority over certain financial accounts and restoration of reasonable access to family reserves. In exchange, he would consider ending the guardianship proceeding. Consider. Not promise. I forwarded that too. Rebecca called almost immediately. Do not answer him yourself. I wasn't planning to. This is useful, but don't overread it. He's offering to stop calling me incompetent if I give him money access. He's linking the two. That's important. It still doesn't erase his claimed concerns. We use it in nay context. I stared through the windshield at cars moving past the pumps. He needs $320,000. Rebecca was silent for pay. Half a second. Explain. So I did. The promissory note. The commercial deal. The capital call. The bridge advances. When I finished, she said, "Send me the documents Laura gave you. We need to understand what can be established and what is still inference." That word mattered. Inference. Not proof. Not yet. Jason's next message arrived that evening. You know, what happens if that deal collapses? I read it at the cottage table with Margaret's notebook beside me. For the first time, he had put the deal and the pressure on me into the same conversation. I wanted to type back that the deal belonged to him, that the debt belonged to him, that the deadline belonged to him. Instead, I sent a screenshot to Rebecca and put the phone face down. The next morning, he asked me to come in. She had arranged the documents across the conference table by date. The blue folder photographs from before I revoked access. The pending reserve transfer. The attorney contact that began before I left Charlotte. The guardianship petition. Jason's voicemail offering to discuss withdrawal if I restored access. His email asking for the limited power of attorney. And finally the text about the deal collapsing. Rebecca placed one finger on the last page. This doesn't prove every reason he filed, she said, but it gives us a cleaner question to ask. What question? If this case is about protecting you, why does your son's willingness to stop pursuing it depend on getting access to your money? I leaned back. For weeks, Jason had made me answer questions. Why did I leave? Why did I give Diane money? Why did I shut him out? Why should anyone trust my judgment? Now, there was a question for him. Rebecca gathered the papers into a file. From this point on, let counsel handle communication. Fine. And don't rescue his commercial deal because you feel guilty about the grandchildren. That one landed harder than the legal advice. I haven't. I'm telling you because he's going to know where to press. My phone vibrated on the table. Jason again. I looked at the screen, but he didn't open the message. Rebecca did not ask what it said. She simply slid the phone back toward me. Don't answer him again. I nodded. She tapped the chain of documents one final time. He just connected the two, things we've been trying to connect. And for once, he had done it in writing. The first formal notice did not come from Jason. It came from Laura. She forwarded a letter issued under the partnership agreement. After Jason missed the capital call, the language was dry enough to make the consequences sound smaller than they were. Coleman Ridge had failed to contribute the required amount by the deadline. The partners reserved their contractual remedies. Discussions would begin regarding refinancing, dilution, or a sale of the affected property interest. Laura had attached a note of her own. Missing the call did not erase Jason's ownership that morning, and it did not mean foreclosure by sunset. It meant the other parties could start using rights already, written into their agreements. Time would matter. So would whatever collateral Jason had pledged. That was less dramatic than the story Jason had been telling the family. It was also more dangerous. No sheriff at a door. No building seized. Overnight. Just a deadline missed, and other people gaining choices Jason no longer controlled. I sent the notice to Rebecca and did nothing else. That afternoon, Natalie called. I let it ring. She called again. Then a message appeared. Andrew, please. This is about the children now. I forwarded it to Rebecca. 5 minutes later, Natalie sent another. Jason will withdraw the petition if you restore just enough funding to stabilize the deal. You don't have to give him everything back. Rebecca called me before I could finish reading. Do not negotiate with her. It wasn't going to. She may be trying to settle. She may also be creating a record. Either way, communication goes through me. What does just enough mean? Don't ask her. I looked at the formal notice on my lined laptop. For years, Jason had turned emergencies into amounts. A contractor needed paying. A closing needed bridging. A refinance needed time. Now Natalie was doing the same thing. Just enough. Rebecca sent a short response on my behalf, stating that any proposal concerning the petition or finances had to go through counsel. Natalie did not answer her. She called me again instead. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. Andrew, I'm not asking you to forgive anything. I'm asking you not to let one business problem destroy the Crosted family. Jason is under pressure. He'll end the court case. We can put that in writing. Please. Her voice sounded different from the fard. Intervention. No polished concern. No careful language about protection. She needed something. That distinction mattered. The next morning, Rebecca received an email from Natalie. Attached were screenshots. Rebecca called me into her office before forwarding anything. Natalie says she wants to correct the impression that she created this plan. What plan? Rebecca turned her monitor. The first screenshot was a text. Exchange dated weeks before the brunch. Natalie had written, "What if he refuses?" Jason's reply sat beneath it. Then we stop asking. I read the 2 lines again. There were other messages around them. Discussions about my access arrangements. References to the senior living consultation. Complaints that I was becoming harder to persuade. Nothing, said guardianship in one clean sentence. It didn't need to. The timing mattered. What is she trying to do? I asked. Protect herself. From Jason? From whatever she thinks is coming. Rebecca opened Natalie's email. She admitted knowing about Margaret's promissory note. She claimed Jason had told her the debt would eventually be handled within the family. She also said she had supported seeking legal advice because she believed I would cut them off financially. Not because she thought I couldn't recognize my own son. Not because I had wandered away from home. Because she believed I would stop funding them. Rebecca leaned back. Don't turn her into an ally. I wasn't planning to send flowers. Good. She's not confessing out of a conscience. She's separating her fingerprints from his. I looked at the day. Text chain. She just admitted she knew the loan wasn't a gift. Yes. And she told my family it was. Yes. That answer felt better than it should have. For several weeks, every document had required an explanation. Diane's transfer, my grief email, the stove, the reserve, account. This one required almost none. Then Dr. Morris's full report arrived. Rebecca read it before I did. The conclusion was careful, but clear. The evaluation did not support a finding that I lacked the ability to understand and manage my personal and financial affairs. It noted normal age-related variability in some tasks, acknowledged grief, history, and found no basis from the assessment to conclude I required a guardian for decision-making. I read the last page twice. Can I frame it? Rebecca stared at me. That was a joke. Keep practicing. Dr. Reed confirmed he would. Stand by his records and explain that he had never diagnosed me with dementia or advised Jason that I was incapable of managing finances. Robert agreed to describe what he had seen at the family meeting. He also sent Rebecca a short statement describing the things he had personally observed over the previous year. I drove myself to family events. I remembered appointments we had made. I discussed repairs on his rental property with enough detail to catch an estimate, he thought, was too high. None of that made him a medical expert. Rebecca said that was exactly why she wanted him limited to what he had actually seen. He was skeptical of me, I told Rebecca. That helps more than a witness who worships you. For the first time since the blue folder appeared, our evidence table looked heavier on my side. Bank records, medical records, Dr. Morris's report, Diane's invoices, the promissory note, Jason's messages tying access to withdrawal, Natalie's text chain. I allowed myself one thought. Maybe this was nearly over. Rebecca ruined it the next morning. Jason's counsel produced the cedar box. I was in her conference room. Within an hour, the brass latch had a scratch near the corner. Margaret's handwriting covered several envelopes inside. Seeing the box, on a lawyer's table instead of our bedroom shelf, made my teeth press together. Rebecca stopped me before I touched anything. It's been produced. We have copies and access. Don't make this about possession. Today. What is he using? She handed me several pages. Margaret's household notes. Andrew forgets insurance renewal. Remind Andrew dentist. Tuesday. Paid electric because Andrew thought autopay was on. Call. Pharmacy for Andrew. There were calendars showing Margaret scheduled. Appointments, tracked bills, renewed policies, and organized household. Paperwork. Jason's argument was obvious before Rebecca said it. He'll say your dependence didn't begin after Margaret died. He'll say she was compensating for problems for years. I kept reading. Some notes looked bad alone. Then I found another page. Andrew, reviewing fleet insurance. Renewal. Another. Andrew, meeting investment advisor. Another. Andrew, negotiating warehouse lease. Margaret had managed our household calendar because that was what she managed. I had run a company with dozens of employees, service vehicles, contracts, payroll obligations, commercial, insurance, equipment purchases, and customers who expected heat in January and air conditioning in July. Division of labor had become evidence against me because Jason had cut away my half. Rebecca watched me sort the pages. This does not prove incapacity, but it gives him something. Yes, the false comfort I'd felt from Dr. Morris's report disappeared. Not because the report changed, because hearings weren't held inside one document. Jason had taken the cedar box before brunch because he knew what was inside could to be arranged into a story. I asked Rebecca to request the entire contents, not just the pages his side had selected. We already did. Good. Andrew, there is another choice. We can argue that some household material has limited relevance and fight over what comes in. I looked at Margaret's notes. A grocery list sat on the back of one page. My name appeared beside furnace filters and coffee. For a moment, I could see her at the kitchen table with her glasses low on her nose, reminding me for the third time that a dentist appointment did not move, simply because I had a supplier meeting. Jason wanted those reminders too. I mean, I had never been capable. If I tried too hard to bury them, he would say I was afraid of my own history. Use the context, I said. Rebecca waited. All of it. She handled household scheduling and bills. I handled company operations, investments, contracts, insurance decisions, and major purchases. Put the two sides next to each other. That exposes material Jason may use. He already has it. Yes. I close the cedar box. Then use all of it. If I start hiding things now, I become the story he's telling. Jason's attorney began with the soup. By then, the hearing had been on. The calendar long enough for the courthouse to stop feeling like a threat and start feeling like an appointment. Rebecca sat beside me with 3 binders open. Across the room, Jason wore the charcoal suit he used for closings. Natalie sat behind him. His attorney walked through the same incidents I had heard for weeks. The stove, the missed dental, appointment, the scam call, then my grief email after Margaret died. I don't know how to keep track of any of this without her. The words sounded worse when another man read them aloud. Next came Diane's transfer, my move to Lake Norman, the accounts I removed from Jason's, access, and pages from Margaret's cedar box showing that she had tracked household bills and appointments. Nothing was invented. That was what made Jason's case dangerous. His attorney did not call me senile. He argued that the incidents, taken together, showed declining judgment and growing vulnerability. Rebecca wrote one word on her pad: context. Dr. Morris supplied it first. Her written evaluation had already been submitted. She explained the testing, my daily functioning, and the limits of what any single assessment could establish. Her conclusion stayed as careful as it had been in her office. The evaluation did not support a finding that I lacked the ability to understand and manage my personal and financial affairs. Jason's attorney asked whether a person could make mistakes and still perform adequately on testing. Yes, Dr. Morris said. Could a person conceal difficulties? People can minimize difficulties. That is why I considered history, functioning, records, and testing rather than one score. No miracle answer, no dramatic declaration, just work. Dr. Reed's records came next. He had never diagnosed me with dementia, never advised Jason that I needed a guardian, and never concluded that I was unable to manage money. Rebecca then moved through ordinary life, property taxes paid, insurance renewed, investment, decisions documented, appointments attended, bank instructions initiated by me, business correspondence showing that I still reviewed matters connected to the ownership interest I retained after selling most of my Brawl's HVAC company, then Diane's $75,000, invoices, accessibility, plans, contractor records, the agreement tying the money to modifications for Raymond's home. Jason's attorney asked why I had not told my son before transferring such a large amount. Rebecca objected to the implication more than the question. I answered anyway, because I didn't need his permission. The room stayed quiet. That sentence mattered more to me than it probably did to anyone else. For months, Jason had treated independence as suspicious whenever it excluded him. Rebecca did not linger on it. She moved to the money. The 2018 bank statement appeared first. $600,000 from the joint investment account Margaret and I owned to Coleman Ridge. Then the promissory note, Jason's signature, Margaret as lender, interest terms, maturity date, estate records showing the note later, passed to me. Then his old email to Margaret. Dad can never know. He'd cut me off. Jason stared at the table while Rebecca read only the relevant lines. She did not accuse him of theft. She did not call the loan fraudulent. She didn't need to. The document established that the money had been a debt and that Jason knew I had been kept in the dark. Next came the later advances. Temporary bridges. Amounts that left my accounts over several years while Jason's commercial projects became more strained. Finally, the capital call. $320,000. Missed. Jason's attorney stood. My client has business obligations. That does not make his concern for his father dishonest. Rebecca nodded. Agreed. That answer made Jason look up. Then she added, the question is whether those obligations affected the relief he sought. The communications answered that better than either attorney could. Jason's voicemail played. Sign a limited financial power of attorney. Restore access to the family reserve, and I will talk to counsel about withdrawing the petition. His email said nearly the same thing in cleaner language. Temporary protective authority. Reasonable. Access. Consider ending the proceeding. Then came his text. You know, what happens if that deal collapses? Natalie's messages were admitted, with the surrounding context. Her text before brunch asked what happened. If I refused, Jason had answered, then we stop asking. Her later communication acknowledged that she knew Margaret's $600,000 was a debt, and that financial access had been part of their discussions before the brunch. Jason's attorney pushed back hard. He argued that families often discuss finances when an older parent may be vulnerable. He said Jason had paid bills for me, organized household matters, and tried to prevent impulsive decisions. He pointed again to Margaret's cedar box notes. Rebecca did exactly what I had asked. She used all of them. Yes, Margaret reminded me about the dentist. Yes, she tracked utilities. Yes, she handled household scheduling. On nearby pages, she had also noted my meetings with investment advisors, commercial insurance reviews, warehouse negotiations, and company matters. Marriage had divided work. Jason had presented one side of that division as incapacity. By the time he was questioned, his jaw had tightened. His attorney let him explain. First, I was trying to protect my father, Jason said. After Mom died, I saw things he didn't see. Bills, missed dates, people asking him for money, Rebecca asked. Including Diane Foster? Yes. You now know. That transfer was documented. Yes. And Dr. Reed never diagnosed your father as incompetent? I never said he did. You told relatives. There were medical concerns. There were. Rebecca did not argue. She placed his voicemail transcript in front of him. If your concern was your father's ability to make decisions, why would restoring your access to his reserve account make you willing to discuss withdrawing this petition? Jason looked toward his attorney. The question was aloud. Because I could protect the assets. Which assets? The family assets. The accounts were owned by your father, correct? They were family money. Legally owned by your father? Jason's mouth flattened. Yes. Rebecca moved to the capital call. You needed $320,000? My business needed capital. And your father had stopped providing advances? He cut everything off, without warning. Your personal accounts? No. Your personal credit? Cards? No. The accounts he owned and had allowed you to access? Jason shifted in his chair. Yes. Rebecca let the silence sit for a moment. Why did you believe you were entitled to continued access? Jason's face changed. Not dramatically, just a small pull at the corner of his mouth. Because I spent years handling everything for him. It wasn't my question. He was going to leave it to the family. Mr. Coleman, why were you entitled to use it now? Jason looked at me. For the first time that day, he stopped speaking to the court and spoke. As my son. Because it was going to be mine anyway. Nobody gasped. Rebecca didn't smile. She simply looked down at the documents already in evidence. That sentence did not prove I was competent. Dr. Morris, Dr. Reed, my records and my functioning addressed that. It did. Something else. It made the financial chain sound exactly like what it was. Entitlement with a deadline. The ruling came after arguments and a recess that felt longer than the entire hearing. The petition did not, to meet the standard required for the guardianship relief Jason sought. I retained control of my decisions and property. No applause. No handcuffs. I stayed seated while the clerk gathered papers. For weeks, I had imagined that winning would feel like getting my house key back after someone locked me outside. It didn't. The key had never legally left my hand. What I got back was the right to stop proving that fact. Every morning, Rebecca leaned toward me. It's over. As to this petition, the financial dispute is not. Across the room, Jason did not look at me. Outside the courthouse, my phone rang. Laura, I answered. The partners have moved into formal restructuring discussions, she said. Jason either needs replacement capital refinancing, or asset sales. The pressure is real now. I looked back at the courthouse doors. How long? Not overnight, but he can't wait forever. Rebecca stood beside me while traffic moved along the street. Laura's voice lowered. Andrew, if you're going to rescue him, this is probably the moment he'll ask. My phone buzzed before she finished. Jason. One message. Dad, please don't do this to us. Jason's message stayed unanswered for 3 days. Dad, please don't do this to us. The wording kept bothering me. Not don't let the partners enforce the agreement. Not I made a mistake. Not I lied about you. Don't do this to us. As if consequences were still something I controlled. Rebecca handled every communication. After the hearing, Laura handled the numbers. I went home, not to the cottage, home. The first night back, I found the kitchen exactly as I'd previewed, left it except for dust along the edge of the counter. I made coffee the next morning and reached for Margaret's second mug out of habit. My hand stopped halfway. Then I took down one mug. That was all. A few weeks later, Laura called with an update on Jason's commercial situation. The partners are moving forward with restructuring, she said. One property, interest is being marketed. They are also exploring refinancing. Is he losing everything? No. Her answer was immediate. He is losing choices. That sounded more accurate. Jason's missed capital call had not erased his property overnight. It had given lenders and partners rights they could now exercise. Fees accumulated. Negotiating power shifted. An asset that Jason once planned to hold could now be sold because other people needed to protect their own money. His lifestyle changed before any final sale did. The club charges stopped. A lease on one luxury vehicle disappeared from the monthly statements Laura showed me because it had been tied to a business entity. Under pressure, a vacation deposit was canceled. A contractor Jason had, once paid early, now waited for cleared funds before sending a crew. None of those things came from me taking his property. They came from me no longer filling the gaps. Then we dealt with Margaret's promissory note. Rebecca sat beside me while Laura explained the options. The principal is not due until 2028, Laura said. You cannot simply demand $600,000 tomorrow because you're done helping him. I know. There are unpaid interest obligations, defaults we can address under the document, Rebecca added. We enforce what exists, nothing more. So that was what we did. A formal notice. Went through counsel requiring Jason to cure amounts already due and acknowledging that I reserved every right under the note. No invented penalty. No accelerated deadline unless the contract allowed it. No revenge number pulled from the air. A real debt. A real signature. A real obligation that Jason had spent years calling a gift whenever the truth became inconvenient. He responded through his attorney. Not me. That mattered more than I expected. For the first time in years, a financial problem involving Jason reached my desk without also arriving as a request for rescue. My grandchildren were different. They had done nothing. Rebecca introduced me to an estate attorney named Charles Monroe after the guardianship case ended. We met in his office and reviewed the education money I'd already set aside for both children. I want Jason unable to touch it, I said. Charles nodded. Management and benefit can be separated. I don't want the kids punished because their father made a mess. They don't have to be. We moved the education funds under an independent, professional trustee. Tuition, approved education expenses, and future distributions would follow written terms. Jason would not control them. Natalie would not control them either. The children remained protected. A week later, my granddaughter called. Grandpa, Dad says money is complicated right now. I sat on the back porch with the phone against my ear. Sometimes it is. Are you mad at us? No. She was quiet. Promise? Promise. That was the only promise I made about money that weak. Charles also revised my estate plan. I did not leave Jason $1 as some kind of insult. I did not write a punishment into a will for an audience I would never see. Instead, we separated benefit from control. If Jason eventually received anything from my estate, he would not automatically control the structure holding it. Independent management would protect the assets and the grandchildren. More important, I kept the right to change the plan. Jason had spent years behaving as if my death had already occurred, for on paper, I wasn't going to organize the rest of my life around his expectation. Natalie moved out before the commercial restructuring was finished. I learned that through Rebecca, because Natalie's attorney sent correspondence about family financial records already exchanged in the guardianship matter. No dramatic announcement, no suitcase thrown onto a lawn. She rented a townhouse and took the children with her under a temporary family arrangement, while she and Jason worked through their separation. According to the messages already in evidence, they had spent weeks blaming each other. Jason said Natalie had pushed too hard. Natalie said Jason had promised I would eventually surrender. Once my money stopped covering the distance between their choices and their bills, they had nothing left to agree about. Jason came to my house on a Thursday afternoon. No appointment, no lawyer. I saw his car through the front window and considered not opening the door. Then he knocked 3 times, the same number of knocks Officer Ramirez had used at the cottage. I opened it, but didn't invite him inside. Jason had lost weight. His shirt collar sat looser than I remembered, and the expensive watch he usually wore was gone. He looked past me toward the hallway. "You're really living here again?" "Yes." He gave a short laugh, with no humor in it. "Must be nice." I waited. Jason rubbed his palms. "Together once. The property is going to sell." I heard. "Below what we wanted." I said nothing. "We're probably selling the house too." Still nothing. His mouth tightened. "You could stop some of this. There it is." "What?" "The reason you came." Jason looked down at the porch boards. "I came because you're my father. Then talk to me about something that isn't money." His head came up. "You think this is just money?" "No. I think money is what you use when you don't want to say the rest." Jason stepped closer. "You humiliated me." I answered. Petition you filed. You dragged Mom's private loan into court. You called it a gift. You made Natalie turn against me. I never asked Natalie to send a single message. You took away everything." That one almost made me laugh. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe. "I took away access to what belonged to Doggis. Me." Jason's voice rose. "You knew what would happen. I knew you had a deadline. You let me fail." "No." He stared at me. I stopped, preventing it. A car passed at the end of the street. Jason looked toward the road, then back at me. "You ruined me." The words came out, flat. No audience, no relatives, no lawyer. Just us. "No," I said. "I stopped financing you." His jaw worked. "Mom would have helped me." I looked through the doorway toward the kitchen table, where the notebook still sat beneath a stack of mail. She did. Jason's eyes shifted. Too many times. He stepped back. For a second, I thought he would leave. Instead, he said, "So that's it? I'm not your son anymore?" I shook my head. "I didn't say that." "What are you saying?" "That you can call me when you want to talk to your father." His face hardened. "And until then? No money, no property, no petition, no inheritance. Discussion." Jason stared at me. I kept my voice level. "If those are the only reasons you have to speak to me, then we don't have anything to say yet. For once, he didn't have a prepared answer. His hand rested on the porch rail, fingers tapping once against the wood. Years earlier, when he was 17, he'd done the same thing after denting my truck and trying to decide whether to tell me before I noticed. I remembered that boy. Then, I looked at the man standing in front of me. They were not the same. Problem. Jason took his hand off the rail. You really mean it? Yes. He stood on the porch another few seconds. Then he walked to his car. I didn't call after him. Inside, the blue folder sat in a closed, legal file Rebecca had returned after the case. I put it on the highest shelf. In my study. Not hidden. Finished. Margaret's notebook stayed. Downstairs. That was different. I was not ready to put away every due, the reminder of what she had done for Jason, or what I had allowed. Afterward, some truths did not need a locked cabinet. They needed a place where I could see them without letting them run the house. My phone stayed quiet that evening. Maybe Jason would call in a week. Maybe a year. Maybe never. For once, that choice belonged to him, and my life belonged to me. When someone you love starts treating your generosity as an obligation, you have to recognize the difference between helping and surrendering control. You can support an adult, child, lend money, open an account, or step in during a difficult season without giving that person permanent rights over your finances. A favor does not become ownership just because it has continued for years. And when someone says, "It was going to be mine anyway," that should remind you why clear boundaries matter while you are still alive and fully capable of making your own decisions. This story also shows why documentation matters. If money changes hands, put the terms in writing. Keep copies of account records, loan agreements, emails, invoices, medical records, and important messages. Do not assume that family relationships make paperwork unnecessary. In fact, family disputes can. It become especially painful because memories, expectations, and entitlement often replace facts. A written record cannot prevent betrayal, but it can prevent another person from rewriting history when the relationship breaks down. You should also be careful when concern becomes control. There is nothing wrong with an adult child noticing that a parent needs help. Real help respects the parent's voice, independence, and legal rights. It does not use ordinary mistakes, grief, or aging as weapons to gain financial authority. If someone claims that you cannot manage your own in life but offers to stop making that claim, once you give them access to your money, you should pay close attention to what their actions are telling you. Another important lesson is that consequences are not the same as revenge. You do not have to destroy someone who has taken advantage of you. Sometimes the strongest response is simply to stop protecting that person from the results of their own decisions. You can refuse another bailout. You can enforce a legitimate debt according to its actual terms. You can protect innocent grandchildren without giving their parents control of the money. You can use attorneys, independent professionals, and proper legal processes instead of threats or impulsive retaliation. That kind of response may feel less dramatic, but it is far harder for anyone to twist against you. Most of all, being a parent does not require you to finance disrespect. Love can remain even after financial access ends. You can leave the door open for a genuine relationship while closing the door on manipulation. Those two choices are not contradictory. If you were in this father's position, when would you have stopped helping? Would you have given your son one more chance after discovering the hidden loan? Or would the attempt to take control of your finances have ended that trust permanently? And if someone in your own family has ever confused your kindness with entitlement, what finally made you set a boundary? Share your thoughts and experiences, because someone listening may be struggling with the same decision and wondering whether saying no makes them cruel Sometimes, saying no is simply the moment you stop abandoning your own rights to keep someone else comfortable.